Hey guys, I'm Danny.
And I'm EJ, and this is the Your Living Proof podcast,
where we talk about addiction and how it affects the family, from the brutal to the beautiful and everything in between. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Your Living Proof podcast.
Danny's in an annoying mood today, guys.
No, I'm not. She says I'm annoying. I'm not. She's being
Are you
critical.
Cool, warm, or annoying? That's just a funny color test, guys.
So there's nothing better than meeting midday in a padded room that's safe where we could have this argument. But
yes,
we all know they're just extremely critical of us men, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are. But we're excited for today. We really are. And don't you worry, I'm sitting right in front of the soundboard.
I hope, okay, if you're listening to this on podcast, just hop over to YouTube because Danny, his facial expressions are on point today. And then you can see how great his hair looks because he's having a really good hair day.
Also, you've heard this before. She only does her hair like once a week, maybe twice if we're lucky.
I do it on Sundays and then on podcast days. That's it.
And most of the funny faces I make are when she's talking and you can't see me in the camera. When it comes back, then I try to look sophisticated. This is episode 77. Okay, and we are discussing something incredibly important today that affects every single family, which unfortunately are millions too many, as the number one manipulation weapon addiction uses on families. Like, what is the number one thing that keeps them stuck, that impacts their ability to help? We're going to get into that. We really are. But before that, just wanted to share a cool little story. And we're in this special time of year where there's hope again.
Oh, spring is the best season.
We live in Utah. The winters can last. Everyone thinks winter's like December, January, but
if you live in Utah, it goes to May.
It sometimes does. But for the first time, there was a little bit of warmth and some birds are chirping, so we're very optimistic.
Yeah, it's hopeful.
With young kids, I'm just like, hallelujah. Like, we can get our kids out of the house and just send them outside for half the day.
Yeah, they feel better. We all feel better being inside.
The older I get, the less tolerance I have for cold, so I'll stop complaining about it, but I didn't mind the cold for most of my life until recently.
I did. I always did.
You always did. It's because you have about 2%
Elsa is
body
wrong.
fat.
Elsa.
She was
so messed up.
The cold bothered me very much.
Very, very much.
Hey, real quick before we get started, I just want to share a little story. I give you the brief summary. Went with a young man I know, collected a 6-month ship recently. And it was really cool when he shared all that he'd learned, all that he'd done, the sacrifices he had made, humbled himself. I mean, just this whole process of recovery had changed him to a really good point at this 6-month mark. But he shared something that was really cool. And that was when it got to the end, he had a mother who got the support she needed, where she was able to actually watch him sleep on a little carport on the side of their house. Now, no mother wants to look outside to a child of theirs. In this case, it was an adult child, curled up, sleeping on the side of the house. That just, it goes against everything that you stand for.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm so grateful that she was willing to do that because that's what got me going. That's what got me here and got me started.
That's so rad.
So cool. But it's a very difficult thing to do. So I love that he gave her the respect of, you know what, I've done all this work, but it was her that got this process started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, it hinges on the fact that if you heard this before, great. Someone or something has to intervene. No one has ever willingly shown up to a treatment program with their own bags packed, paying for it themselves with the desire to change.
No.
Someone or something has to intervene. It's going to be death. It's going to be a judge's court order, or it's going to be a family that learns how to do this. So, did you want to say something?
No, I was going to say that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. It's the playbook for families. Before we get going in this little topic, and I hope I teased you, that we're going to talk about the most powerful weapon used against families that holds them stuck when they have an addicted loved one. But I want to start adding a little value to each episode. Hopefully that over the course of listening, you gain a lot of knowledge about this crazy world. If you have someone struggling with an addiction, we want to empower you. If you have someone in your home, maybe an adolescent, is that the right word?
Yeah.
A teen, younger person, there are some legitimate challenges. And I want to talk about this notion that I'm sure you've heard of, which is youth programs, wilderness programs.
Yeah. And we're doing this too because wouldn't you say there are so many people that ask you about it?
They do. And most of the people I've worked with, their loved one now older had at some point experienced this.
Yeah. Like gone to one of these camps when
Yeah.
they were young.
And so I want to preface by saying I'm not bashing on any of this. I'm not talking down, because I feel like any program out there that's attempting to help someone, a behavioral health type program, is awesome and will be better than nothing. But there are some tricky things. I mean, why do people go this route? Okay, if you have someone underage, you can't set a boundary and kick them out of your house. So it presents a serious set of challenges. One of the most beneficial aspects of wilderness therapy is that it allows a child to address their issues without any of the day-to-day distractions. That's the hope, right? Let's just take them out of their current environment and put them in a different one.
Yeah.
Most parents only resort to this when things have gotten really bad.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it is a last resort, right? Like
when they don't know what else to do. And especially when things become a little bit dangerous or threatening.
Sure. Like if there were other kids at home too that maybe were being negatively affected or something like that.
So I can go off on a tangent. I wrote some things down. So I want to make sure that I go through these. I want to empower you with why they don't often work. And it is not because of the programs themselves. They are very controversial in the first place. They do teeter, some would say, on being legal or not. I'm just going to read this to you. In the United States, thousands of teens have their rights signed over to therapy camps in the troubled teen sector, a largely unregulated multi-billion-dollar industry aimed at rehabilitating youth labeled as troubled or delinquent by parents, guardians, psychiatrists, schools, or officials.
Okay, wait. I have to interrupt you there. You should watch the Paris Hilton documentary about this because it happened to her and it was crazy.
So
it's on YouTube. Sorry.
Good point.
Yeah.
Whether the concern is substance abuse, poor grades, mental health, much of the troubled teen industry packages its tough love approach as a cure-all. While institutions that fail under the broad category of therapy camps come in many forms, the most rustic and inherently rural are wilderness therapy camps. So I want to give you unbiased insight. Some of these programs are better than others. And if you are ever in a situation where your loved one's becoming dangerous to themselves or to someone else, taking action and even going this route is better than nothing.
Sure.
In some cases. It is not the program or the people running the programs. So why are...
What do you mean it's not the program or the
people? The reason there's such a high failure rate. Thank you for clarifying that. It's because of who they're there with.
That's why they're not successful most of the time?
No. I have heard the same story on repeat where some kid was out of sorts and they entered this program with an associate's degree in drugs and alcohol or porn. After a period of time, they left this program with a master level understanding of drug trafficking, selling, growing, distributing, drug use.
Oh, so you think you're sending your kid to be healed, and in the process, they're being tutored in a completely different way.
Yep. The other children that are there with them don't want to be there. They're there held against their will. They are still young enough. I mean, when we were all young, we were dumb, right?
Sure.
We get more serious about life when we get older. None of them have any interest in listening to anybody and changing. They're all invincible. Nothing. It's just a terrible situation. So who they're surrounded by has the biggest influence. Now, when you're an adult and you go to a program, you're still influenced by a lot of people who are broken and dysfunctional. But most people have some desire to put their life back together.
Sure. Well, you tend to have kind of more of a motivation too, and when you're an adult, I feel like, because maybe you have a family at home that you want to get back to or something like that. But when you're a kid.
So please, if you're listening in and you're looking and contemplating on whether or not to spend a large amount of money on going to one of these programs, be very cautious. Reach out. Send me an email. We can meet and talk about it, because there are very few times where I feel like this has any benefit to anyone. However, if you do this route, the number one most important thing isn't even what happens to them out there. It's what happens at home while they're gone.
Yeah, the work you do.
So when they come home, if that environment has changed, there's a chance. But if they come home to the same things where all of your boundaries are terrible, the relationship's still toxic, everyone's still living in fear and all of those things, then that's a problem. So just be
Which is so hard to identify too. I just want to say that because I feel like a lot of families are like, no, they're the problem. Like if they're gone, there's peace in our house. And that might be true, but there's still a lot of underlying dysfunction that needs to be healed and talked about and removed before they come back in.
I hope I described it well. Do you think I covered it?
I think it's awesome.
I have seen too many people leave that were problematic who came home and had progressed to a totally new level of problematic.
Yeah. And I think it's also really hard because even if the dream happened and it was a positive experience for them where they were surrounded by kids that were wanting to make changes or whatever, it's still kind of the same exact thing as when an adult comes back. There's still work to be done. Yes, you got a good start, but there's still so much healing that needs to be done. It can't just be like, all right, throw them back into life. Like,
yeah, 100%.
And
there are some places better than others. You just need to be very careful.
Yeah.
When they're older and they're an adult, the resources are more abundant. There's a lot better options, and most of them are great.
Yeah.
So let's get to it. That was the little nugget.
I'm really glad you touched on that. It was awesome.
The nugget for today. What is the number one manipulation tactic addiction uses on families?
The topic for today.
Yeah, what did I say?
The nugget.
Oh.
We just did the nugget.
That's why everyone needs a woman.
You just want to say nugget.
That's why you need a woman in your life.
Yes. So the topic for today, this is so good. So if you're listening, I want you to think in your mind, like, what is it? Like, what's the number one thing being used against you right now if you have an addicted loved one?
Yeah, what would you say it is?
So just think in your mind. And I mean, there's several. I'm not trying to say, hey, there's just one.
No, this is just the worst.
But this one is by far and away the worst. But if we're gonna name some names here, blame, hope, guilt.
Yeah, there's several, but those are the big three.
Few.
Yeah.
And so most I would say anyone who has a loved one in their home that is affected by or is using drugs or alcohol or porn has these going on to some degree within the family structure. And it kind of affects people in different ways, right? Like you know how mom carries like these moms typically go to the guilt. Like they always feel guilty. Moms feel guilty about everything.
But can I say something? They all work through them.
Oh, like, for sure.
If you're guilty, eventually the guilt stops and you just get determined. If you're really hopeful, eventually your hope fades.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay. And if you're blaming something, you'll blame it on it for a long time, but eventually you're like, well, it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah. Or it'll still be there, but you're just kind of you'll still be able to overcome it to a point. But this other one, nope. It just takes hold and just ravages you. And I would say it just continues to gain momentum, right?
And every family at some point, different points, will experience it. It always comes to this head. And it's fear. Now, to get serious for a moment, it's the very serious fear that stems from threat. That if you take action, if you set a boundary, if you demand that they do something, if you even just intimidate their dysfunction, that they will just die. Maybe they say you'll never see them again, or that they'll take their own life.
Yep.
Very serious. And almost every family I've ever worked with has experienced that. It's actually, I do this assessment when we start the process, and it's one of the first few questions that's asked is how often or do they frequently threaten suicide?
Right.
Now, that's a crazy question to come out the gate with, right?
It gets real personal real quick.
Especially when you're just meeting someone for the first 5 minutes, that one of those questions, and why it's to set the stage so that they can understand, oh my gosh, that's normal.
Right.
It is. Of course, suicide should always be taken seriously, without a doubt. In the face of immediate threats, seek emergency help. You've heard that. Like there's hotlines, you call places. It's the first thing they're going to say. And that's obvious. We all know that. I think it's safe to say anyone listening here, we all agree on that.
Yeah.
There are many resources for suicide prevention. However, the focus of this episode is to discuss the phenomenon of how frequent these threats are being used on families and what it does to them. So although very serious threats, look how fear neutralizes the family's ability to help.
Yeah.
I used it. Everyone in my program right now, their loved one uses it. You know what? If you try to send me here, I'm just going to go kill myself.
That's terrifying.
You know what? If you guys won't allow me to do this in here, then guess what? You're never going to see me again. It paralyzes them from taking any action. Right? They're already scared. They're already worried. Like the situation's already a bad one. But then when all of a sudden these are thrown in, isn't it? It's so terrible because you have to take the threat serious. That's what we've been taught to believe, and you do. But when they're used as threats, it's a different thing.
Well, and I just want to say that it's actually like psychological and emotional abuse. That's what it really, really is.
And it's used on 100% of people eventually. If it's not, if they're not using it on you now, they will.
And why? Because it's so effective.
It works every time.
100% of the time it works.
Yep.
So, another thing that they often do is they tell you that it's your responsibility to give them a reason to live.
Well, and I like what you said at the beginning. It's psychological and emotional abuse. It is.
It is.
Trust me, from experience, they're in a bad place. They can't find their way out. It's a terrible place to be. I've been there, but the abuse is happening to you.
Yes, because when you are offering a solution to them or, presenting options for help and their response is to threaten suicide, that's abuse. Making suicide threats when they are caught using, stealing, cheating.
Yeah, whenever they're busted.
Whenever they get busted and their immediate threat is, I'm going to go kill myself, that is emotional abuse. And causing you to have to live every day with that possibility of guilt and threat hanging over your head. I mean, that... And even the implication that it is your fault.
That's what I wanted to get in on right there. That this is somehow your fault. That if you take action, if you ruffle their feathers, you rock the boat, that it's your fault.
That's what they do every time, though.
I know. So I hope this is one that really hits home with some of you that have been living with this terrible feeling inside, dealing with this horrible situation where fear is now being thrown in your face. That everyone gets to this point. No one talks about it. It's not something we share at church or at the gym or with other friends. Like, no one wants to talk about it.
No, because nobody wants to say out loud that their husband or their child or their spouse has threatened suicide. No one wants to say those words out loud because it's ugly and scary. But when these things are said to you, and it literally means that you are being emotionally taken hostage. You are.
And no one has a chance. So how does this happen? Because you love them. It doesn't happen with your nieces or nephews. It doesn't happen with your cousins. It doesn't happen with your neighbor. It happens because they're yours. They're your people, your family.
Yeah.
You love them and you are scared.
Yeah, you don't want them to die.
You're already worried about it. Like you are so fearful that you could even possibly make the situation worse.
No, and especially when you're doing everything in your power and turning your life upside down to try to make it better. But I want to get even more real here and say the real truth, which is that
I know what you're going to say. Oh, this is a good one. So, yeah.
But it's true. You are scared that they're going to die, but that's not what you're the most scared of. You are the most scared that they're going to die and that you are going to have to live for the rest of your life wondering if you could have done something different.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the real root fear.
We posted that on social media, and it was one of the few posts because, listen, what we do isn't sexy or appealing to people, and no one wants to accept the fact they need help here. But it was one of the things that went somewhat viral, and it was that because it struck a nerve with a lot of people.
Because it's the truth.
Acknowledging, yes, you see that your greatest fear is that they're going to die from this, but even beyond that is a lifetime of regret that you could have done something or should have done something different.
Yep.
Now, if you're a victim of these situations, you might be trying to figure out, and this happens to everybody. Okay, they're doing this. Is this a mental health issue or is this an addiction issue?
Yeah, so hard.
Like, what is it? It's a tricky thing. And sometimes it can control you, and genuinely they do have problems. I think the best way to put it into a consumable way to understand, they're dealing with something. But the poisons that they're consuming, the self-medication that they're doing has amplified everything so much.
Yeah.
So yes, there's underlying issues. That's the whole point of recovery. The whole point of recovery is not to stop doing drugs and alcohol and porn. It's to figure out why, to become whole and healthy inside, to fill all the holes, all the gaps that these substances were filling for you. So don't worry about what it is or isn't, because it just still paralyzes your ability to take action.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome this fear? Because let's all admit it is, when we say it's the worst, it's the most deadly, it's because when things get, like when you work past hope, you work past guilt, you work past all these others, everyone gets stuck at fear. Everyone who enters our program, gets to that point. Some of them are able to work through it and some of them aren't. It's a tough one.
It is.
So you get over it, let me just share, by getting support, getting tools. What our program does is it gives people all the resources, tools, understanding of the path forward, what they need to do, what they need to do next. But it is the constant support that you're going to need.
Amen.
You'll get to a point where you'd see this and you're willing to face it. And then guess what? Everybody reverts back. Maybe a day later or a week later, you fall right back to where you were before.
Yeah, because feelings overwhelm you.
Having that constant group support, that's why the families that have success with this are those that enter some sort of program, some type of program for them where they're empowered, they're supported, and they're constantly reminded that what they're doing is the best thing.
Yes. So the solution to that fear is learning how to unite as a family instead of continue to be torn apart.
Mm.
This never has to be a reality, regardless of what your loved one chooses, because the solution is you learning what everything you can do is. You can learn that. You can learn exactly what that means, and then you can know, I did it. And that's literally what our program teaches. The solution is you learning how to speak to the language of addiction so that it can hear you.
Which we just did. I think it was in our last podcast.
I don't know.
Did we do that, or was that on social media? The ways that you speak to someone.
Oh, no, that was on Instagram. We just talked about it.
You know what's so cool is everybody uses all these words. You exhaust yourself for so long trying to get through to them and talk to them. And everyone in a program learns quickly that you can't actually use words to get through to them.
No.
It's in first unity. You and the others that are involved in their life, your family, is unified.
Oh, we did do this.
Yeah. And then you're taking action, which is setting boundaries, and you're learning how to set those boundaries, and then you're able to kind of remove yourself and use silence.
Yeah. So the solution is learning to fight tactically instead of emotionally, and that is so hard to do, and it is, I would say, impossible to do without support.
Yeah, because don't fear this. What should you fear?
You should fear being in the exact same place you are right now next year. Except, unfortunately, you'll never get that grace to be able to stay in the exact same place because addiction is progressive and things will get worse and worse.
Every do. Always time. Every time they get worse. And if your loved one was to ultimately die from this, those who experience that, which is way too many, again, millions too many, will have somewhat more peace in their heart because they did something. They attempted it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because what is the actual goal here? What are we trying to do? We love someone. They're going down a dark hole because of their addiction.
Yeah, they're off the rails.
Our goal is to give them a chance. Owning the fact that there's not going to be some magical day when all of this just goes away. That we're going to execute, and be supported in giving them an actual chance. As scary as it is. So it's a difficult thing. And it could make sense if you listen to this, that be like, okay, so-and-so's in this situation. Maybe they're living in your home and they're maybe even if it's progressed to the point where they're dying of organ failure because of the amount of alcohol they're drinking, and every day you wake up wondering if they're alive or dead, and you have to be the one that checks. Even then, you're paralyzed by this fear. It's a scary situation because if you take action, it might make it worse. What we are trying to do is to face those fears, overcome those fears, have support to keep us right there so that we can give them a chance.
And you know what cures fear is action.
Yeah.
And you can only take action when you have that support every step of the way, because it will be scary. The scary won't go away, but you will be able to have the courage needed in that scary time if you have the support.
And can I say one last thing before you close?
Yeah.
If your loved one's already there, it's because the walls are closing in. They're getting really desperate. Which I hope what you can interpret as that is like, hey, now you have a chance. They can see that the story's coming to an end. Now's the time to put a plan in place, to take some action. If your loved one hasn't gotten there yet, and once they do, I hope that's your indication to be like, okay, you know what? Serious threat, but I'm going to set this over here on the shelf, and we're going to figure out as a family the action that we're going to take, because now I can see that it's time.
Yep.
So as scary as it is, I almost look at it as a fortunate time to be like, okay, we're going to do something about it. And get the tools, support, and resources you need to effectively do that.
So go to our website because it outlines everything that we offer. You can see, and honestly, it will be, as scary as it is, the best decision you have made in a long time in this regard, for sure. So before we go, let's read the Serenity Prayer for families. God, grant me the serenity to accept that I cannot change other people, the courage to change the person that I can, and the wisdom to know that it is me.
Grateful that you guys join us. Please share this episode with someone if you don't mind. And remember, you cannot grow, heal in isolation. And that means you and your family. It's only in community that happens. So reach out and find your community. We hope you guys have a great week. Thanks.